which I think we're all about, a strong congressional background, and it's, Bruce, really a pleasure to have you here to talk about the American city.
Well, thanks, Anthony. And, Jeanette called me a couple weeks ago and said, I really want you to come and talk at this bike summit. I said, the last time you asked me to do something like this was with David Byrne when his book came out. And Earl was there, right? So we go to the museum, and David Byrne comes out and gives a very strange talk. If anyone has followed the Talking Heads, you know what I'm talking about, right? This is before your bill passed, Earl. And so we go through this whole thing. And the first person comes up, looks very agitated, and says, I have a very hard question for you, from the person from the Brookings Institution. You do not have a bike rack in front of that building of yours in Massachusetts Avenue. So I basically said, okay, by tomorrow morning we'll have a bike rack, and everyone's going to calm down. It took a little bit longer, but they were right. A couple stats, because of the Brookings Institution, we love facts. In 1983, nearly half of young Americans had a driver's license. Today it's 29%. When people live within a mile of work, nearly 40% walk or bike in 2009. That's up from 25% in 1995. Same for if they live within a mile of errands. Okay, these are profound shifts in a very, very short period of time, and I think we are at the beginning of something that's going to be even more dramatic over time, and that's because the big trends and the big forces are with this movement. First trend is the decline in household size. I know this is not what anyone in this room really thinks about, but at the Brookings Institute, right, we follow demographics. In 1900, 4.6 people per household. In 1950, 3.38. I'm not sure who the 0.38 was. 2010, 2.5. It just keeps going down. The bulk of the growth in this country, partly because of aging, partly because of people delaying getting married, partly because of people having less children, right, is that their households will be smaller. And when households are smaller, people think differently about where they live and what kind of community they basically want to join. What your movement represents is essentially a reflection and a reinforcement of what I would call cityness, right? Density, proximity, the integration of uses, the kind of neighborhoods we used to build in this country 100 years ago. A mashup, right, of eds and meds and entrepreneurs and techies and artists and companies and cyclists, right? Because when you have that kind of density and when you have that kind of proximity, synergies happen. We begin to mix ideas and innovate. The most profound change in business location today, if we went to Research Triangle in North Carolina, Raleigh-Durham, the quintessential science park built in the United States, where every corporation was separate from every other corporation, right? Because the thought was, in a Cold War kind of era, we need to invent our ideas in these secluded campuses, protect our intellectual property. That has completely changed today. In sector after sector, cluster after cluster, the notion of open innovation, the notion of networks, and the notion of people living close to where they work. So if you go to Research Triangle today, what you'll find is the quintessential science park urbanizing, putting in bike lanes, putting in housing, God forbid, near companies, right? The way, again, we used to build neighborhoods. One last thought. We need to repair an economy that went completely off track before the recession, because all we did was worship at the altar of consumption and home buying, and literally shopping, and we were addicted to debt. We forgot that what makes an economy great is to innovate, yes, but produce as well. And I'm so glad you brought up manufacturing, because I think what this movement represents, because of your commitment to quality place, is also a commitment to a sound and sensible growth model. And that growth model must mean, yes, idea generation, but also must fundamentally mean making things again. Last point, we went to Detroit. If we went to Detroit today, a city of 138 square miles, that the height of American prosperity post-war was 2 million people, that now is about 700,000 and is about to go into emergency financial management. We can go to Midtown Detroit, and right next to the College of Creative Studies is Shinola. Sorry to bring up a competitor, but or maybe a collaborator. But there is a bike manufacturer literally in the central part of Detroit, right? That is the future of America, right? We are going back to the future. We're going back to the future in the way we design our communities, and we're going back to the future by understanding this fundamental interplay of production and innovation. And you may not think about your movement as really at the vanguard of that, but that's what you are. So I come here, partly because Jeanette told me to, but it's very persuasive. If you're going to put bike lanes on Prospect Park West, you better be persuasive. But partly just to celebrate what this movement represents, because I think this fundamentally represents the future of our country. Thank you very much.